Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast where we inspire growth, beat down biases, and get into all sorts of good trouble, with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
No topic is off limits as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
So get ready to join us for some courageous conversation, because Not Going Quietly starts right now.
Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast for outraged optimists and heartbroken healers all over the world, where we surface life-searing truths in the name of radical togetherness. I'm your host, Britt East. My co-host, Jonathan Beal, is out sick today, but we're so lucky to have the fantabulous Cindi Bright as our featured guest. I can't wait for you to meet her. She's absolutely amazing. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Cindi Bright is a speaker, consultant, and radio host and author of The Color of Courage, Crushing Racism in Corporate America. Her work focuses on the ecosystems of corporate America impacting and impeding progress for brown and black people. She's the producer and host of Heartbeat Radio in its 5th year, a live weekly show hosted on Rainier Avenue Radio, diverse community programming focusing on the heart condition of this country impeding diversity progress. As a former HR executive, she led HR for 3 financial services businesses. Her work focused on organizational development, diversity, and leadership. She had global responsibilities in these roles. Reporting to CEOs, Cindi has experience working with C-suite executives and board of director leaders. A former candidate for public office in 2018, her platform has become a highly sought-after show to air the voices of people and to influence public policy to improve the lives of Black and brown people. I am so thrilled to welcome Cindi to the show. She and I were in different cohorts of the same executive MBA program at the University of Washington a few years ago. My background is in corporate America, just like hers, which is one of the reasons I really love her book. I can't wait for you to hear more about it and learn more about it. So let's get into it. Cindi, how are you today?
I'm well, Britt. How are you? And it's been more than a few years. It's been a decade.
Oh my gosh. Don't remind me. Time flies. It's crazy how much has happened since then, and all I've been through, all you've been through. I've been such a fan of yours from afar, and watching all that you do. I'm so glad we get the chance to sit down together and chat some about your book and all that you're working on. In your book, again, it's called The Color of Courage, Crushing Racism in Corporate America. You recount your harrowing experience of being fired without severance from a prominent HR position. What would you like your readers to understand about the consequences of paying lip service to anti-racism while just nibbling around the edges of white supremacy?
We'll talk about starting off strong with questions. First off, that firing happened while I was in school, business school. So I don't know if you knew that because we were in the 2 different cohorts. But yeah, it was all going down while I was sitting in class.
Stressful.
And so it was incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
So your question around kind of like the performative nature of anti-racism and white supremacy, look, I'll say, I spent 3 decades in corporate America, and even watching post-pandemic, post-COVID, in 2020, this was the hot topic because we witnessed George Floyd's murder on TV. And all of the corporations came out and said, we're going to send you emails. We support racial justice. 2 years later, most businesses like mine, consultants, Black, brown people, there's no money in these budgets. And I have often said that the only investment into Black and strong in corporate America is their coffee budgets. They don't put money behind any of this work. You like that, huh? It's literally, they put more money into their coffee budgets than they have into racial equity work. And it's gone away. We're kidding ourselves if we believe that this is ever going to be on top of mind for any of them. So,
oh my gosh, that is so funny.
I mean, this is, it's the truth.
That's one of the
I cannot
reasons.
tell you
Sorry, that's one of the reasons I love you, is you're so funny and searing at the same time.
Like, they don't want us. They don't want women like me. They are but it's come to a head. I will say that it has come to a head. And that's why you see women like me unleashed. And that's why you go on LinkedIn and you see all the Black women all saying the same exact things. It's come to a head, and corporate America is on its knees. It may not admit it. It's on its knees. When you look at unionization across this country, the labor movement's happening. When you look at the numbers of people who have not come back into, you know, minimum wage paying jobs, and I'm going to say minimum wage in quote unquote, because nobody can make a living on $15 an hour. This is all the same shit. I hope it's okay that I say that on your
Yeah,
podcast.
it's
It's
encouraged.
all the same, right? It's like, so this won't work the way that things have been, and it will not be fixed. It must be rebuilt. And so that's part of why I wrote the book and
Yeah.
start talking about some of the systems that, yeah.
Yeah, you did something funny on LinkedIn. I'm gonna tell on you, and I hope it's okay. This is a quick segue. I've been laughing about this for weeks. This probably happened 3 weeks ago, and I tell you, I've been laughing about it for weeks. Somebody asked you for references or something for, I think, something maybe you were applying for, and you're like, okay, well, if you allow me to talk with 3 Black people at your organization, and then I'm happy to give you references, and of course, dial tone.
I mean, look, that's a colonized system, right? That is a system. They want 3 references from people on your work. I'm happy to provide those to you, but can you provide me 3 Black people that I can speak to inside your business? And the looks on their faces when you ask that, see, this is the thing. They've always had the power. And now I've reclaimed my power, as many Black people. We are saying, look, if that's the game you want to continue to play, and you want to gatekeep whether we come in or not, and you want to gatekeep if we fit your stereotypical mold of what you think we're supposed to be, then you ante up the references so I can check you out. Because, and how many of you want us to use the same system towards you?
Yeah.
And so this is inherently the problem, that it's been so colonized and so controlled, it's being controlled by the same demographic of people, that now we're saying, no, if you can't have our money if you won't have us.
Yeah.
And so as a consumer, we take a stand. As an employee, we take a stand. And I should say to you, I do some of these. I apply for jobs, and to see how far I get, because I'm keeping tabs on who they all are. I'm keeping tab. We all are. Like, we have, every Black woman's got receipts, Britt. Like, I'm like, okay, how far do I get? How many rejection notices do I get
Right.
when I know I'm more qualified than the person interviewing me?
Oh my
Right. So
gosh.
don't come at me with none of that mess anymore. We're done with that.
I love it because, it's so empowering, and I love your word unleashed. And I hope people really take that to heart. We as employees have all of the leverage right now. Never in my lifetime have we as employees and prospective employees had more leverage. So it's incumbent upon us to use it and to get empowered, to take up space in the world, and to summon all the power we have, and use that leverage. I really like that. We're both from the Seattle area, which is, one of those politically liberal regions that is so quick to we're so quick to pat ourselves on the back for our attitudes without ever really putting those attitudes into action. I mean, we might have friends of different races or genders or sexual orientations, but when it comes to actually sharing power, amending wrongs, or even acknowledging what's true, suddenly we disappear. It's almost as if we want to claim allyship, just as long as it doesn't cost us anything or inconvenience us in any way. So here's my question. What do you think it's going to take for us to finally capture the sustained attention of well-meaning white people in a way that compels them to actually risk something or change their behavior?
I say that there are three S's, the letter S, that must be met in order for you to be a leader in this world, in any space. One is that you must have suffered.
Mm,
The second is you must have sweat. And the third is you must have sacrificed.
mm,
Now, if you find white people, so this is, I'm getting at your question, when you find white people that meet those three criteria, and by suffering doesn't mean you had to go through a pandemic and not get your hair done, right? When when you have met that criteria, then you are then in a space of like my sense of humor. But that's really
yes.
happened during the pandemic, right? The women on the street because they don't have their roots done because fake blonde is what has kept them in positions of power. So to to it's the truth, Britt. Like this is a black woman's truth, right? Like um
Yeah.
so you can't be an ally to somebody if you are not willing to step aside or suffer or put somebody else before you. That is not how white women have been raised. And I talk about this in my book. Now let me also say, I say it on many of my shows on air. I'm clearly not talking about all white people. I shouldn't have to say that. But by you can look at the numbers in this country on white women and their increased support of hate and all the things that people who are non-white have to contend with on a daily basis. If you aren't in those positions, look at who runs nonprofit, who predominantly holds the CEO position in nonprofit organizations, and nonprofits are often serving constituents that are the least of thee, right? From
Mhm.
a biblical term, the least of thee is who they serve. And yet, when I've asked these white women, I've asked several of them, I've asked them in public, I've asked them on air, if you didn't have CEO behind your title, would you still be in that nonprofit?
Mm.
And the
Wow.
looks on their faces is because they believe that it's only them that should hold positions of power, that it's only them that should be the bosses. They don't see themselves as ever working for us or actually serving. Because when you're in there for a position of power, that is not about service to the community. That is about me, which is a common. And so I've said in my book, the difference between one of the major differences between white women and black women is white women are raised as princesses, right? Like everything is, they put the tiaras on and we raise their girls to believe that. And I think that is a tragedy to do that to young girls. And black girls are raised as warriors because we have to fight for our families and fight to stay alive and make sure our brothers and our kids aren't killed. And, we're the ones making 53 cents to the dollar. So we've got to work the two jobs to keep the lights on in the house. They don't. So therein lies the differences between, races of women and so can we ever bring these women to the table to change them? I don't think so. I think that what you see happening now, what you comment on about is the workers' power. It's going further than that now because people are not going back. So this isn't going to be cyclical. I firmly believe business will never look the same again. I firmly believe that the generations behind me, I have a 30-year-old son, so he's millennial, the Gen X's, the Gen Z's, none of them are ever going to go into these corporations to get abused by white women in power, to spit them out, use them up for everything they have, and then spit them out so that those women can climb. Those days are done. And so it's not, I believe, read my book, I call for the cleaning out of middle management. That's where they all exist. That's where the power exists. I believe there is a new day, and we're rebuilding a new day where we have access and we're building access and our own avenues for success now. So entrepreneurship, um, many black people are out in our own spaces doing our own things because we refuse, particularly black women, our health is at stake. We constantly have to live under these terrifying conditions inside of these corporations. It's a new day, Britt, and I don't see it ever going back to the way it was. I know for a fact young people will never tolerate these chicks ever. So it's not going to happen.
That is awesome and inspirational. I have so many questions coming out of that. First I wanted to give credit to Kimberly Crenshaw, a famous Black woman who came up with the theory of intersectionality, which states that bigotry is experienced not only quantitatively differently, but qualitatively differently. And you alluded to that with white women and Black women, the relationship in which they're socialized in the US, that it's not just additional layers of misogyny, that when you layer race on top of gender, the experience in the US that Black women face on a daily basis is qualitatively different. It's just of a different field. It's not, so yeah, you have some things in common, it seems like, because you're women, but then you have this whole other area of bigotry that you face on a daily basis because the Black experience, the Black female experience is so different. And I think a lot of us don't have the theory behind that, haven't read the books. Okay, fine, whatever. But the real problematic point is we don't stop and think about the experience of other people. We don't listen to them. When it inconveniences us, we're quick to discount what they're trying to tell us, and because we just don't want to deal with it, or we're getting something out of it, the paycheck or the power or whatever it happens to be in that moment. How would you describe? Could you flesh out a little bit more your experience in corporate America as a Black woman and how that's different to the experiences of some of those gatekeepers, which are often white women in middle management?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. The intersection, gender equality cannot be achieved without addressing the intersection of race. And let's be clear, when you look at the statistics in any company I've done business in, the statistics around diversity progress are in the gender space, which are benefiting white women. It is not benefiting Black women. And so that's what companies hold on to meet their shareholder demands around 0.2% diversity progress year over year. They can't hold on to a trend. And they keep saying this is a hiring and a retention issue. No, it's not. It's a race issue. And it's a race issue because you've got your middle management full of bigoted women that sit there in meetings and nod their heads one way, like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I. And then when they turn their backs, they're destroying that Black woman. And it looks like this. It's never going to be straight out the way calling you a name. But what they do is they plant seeds about you in meetings, right? They're sitting in meetings and they say, does anybody know what's wrong with Cindi today? Did you notice she's succession planning meetings I'm sitting in? I'm not sure if she's ready for that yet. We should talk about, let's change the criteria that we need to have in order to get into that position, right? It's setting the bar different for Black women. It's sabotaging her behind the scenes. And then when they don't hire you, they call all the people out in the Seattle area to talk about the passive aggressive stuff. They call all the HR headhunters run by white women, HR executive headhunting firms now hiring diverse people, again, white women benefiting on the backs of Black and brown women. They call all of them and say, did you know, Cindi, that's how it's done. And so once that and they fertilize it. And so those women stick together. And I keep saying this, that women are women's own problem. You can talk all you want about the patriarchy, but none of those guys ain't got an ounce of intelligence that should keep them in these positions of power. It's these women that are upholding it because those women want proximity and access to it. It gives them benefits to it, right? They're being harmed too. They just can't seem to see the forest for the trees because they've been conditioned. The polite term I'll say is anything for a man or anything for money. I have a much more graphic way of describing that I won't do on your podcast. But it's the truth. And it's the story in my book about what a white woman friend will do because she had proximity to power. Even though she told me herself it was only 2 inches long, she would still prefer to be with that than to be with her sister and help another woman succeed. That's how they roll, and every Black woman knows it.
Yeah, and I can't help but wonder if some of it's fear-based thinking, and I guess depending upon their levels of awareness or attunement. But there's clearly, racism. We're just awash in racism in this country. We're all roiling in this same storm of it, and we respond to it in all sorts of different ways, and it's so insidious. One of the things that you alluded to was token efforts by corporations, and I've heard it said before that you can kind of infer the quality and effectiveness of a chief diversity officer's work based on how quickly they're fired, which is, of course, an intentionally provocative statement meant to convey that corporate leaders often hire them to preserve the status quo rather than make change. I mean, it's almost like these corporations are using HR departments and diversity statements, DEI programs as some sort of protection racket to legally indemnify their straight white cis male supremacy.
It's performative.
Yeah, like they'll do the bare
It's
minimum to
performative.
give themselves something to
Yeah.
point to as a token effort in the case of
And they
some
blame.
PR crisis or legal emergency. I mean, and like at this point, it's like, I wonder, and you alluded to this earlier, like, is it even possible to change corporations from within their existing structures, or do we have to create new structures from the ground up?
I have thoughts. I have ideas about that. I'll share a couple with you
Yeah.
because I sell some of this stuff as part of my business. But you're right that I actually talk about the life cycle of a Black woman in my book. It's about a 2-year life cycle. So you're right. You can't expect one person after decades and decades of racial injustice, and then you hire one person and give her or him, the minimalist budget possible to fix an ecosystem that is infested with racism. They can't fix it because that is an inside job, right? You can't fix an internal culture when it's infested with racists and bigots all over the place. And how often do you ever see white folks held accountable? Well, if you bring an issue for, look, we're just starting to see it, right? In the news, we just start to see, what's her name? The Theranos CEO, where she
Right.
frauded all these people at
Right.
homes. But you know what? She's pregnant, so let's not have her commute her sentence until April next year so that she can give birth in peace. Or Felicity Huffman, who is paying to have her child admitted into Stanford while my child is having their work academically to get himself into, right? So they're so used to having the privilege and they're not held accountable. So do I believe that we can actually change culture? No, not with this. It's so full of bigotry, even by the one, and I actually say this in my book, even the woke ones can be problematic. They think they know everything, and I have yet to come across white women who actually want to learn and listen. They don't. They believe that they have all the answers, and the way that they've always been taught is the way it is. So here's the thing. The term I've been using a lot more lately to solve these business problems, I'll say this. I am pro people, I am pro profit, and I am pro prosperity. All three of those I believe can coexist. The way it's structured now, it can't. So to bring this leveling playing field up, and let me give you one more data point. I had the chair of the Washington Roundtable on my show recently. That's Corporate America. He quoted a statistic, and he said last year GDP spend, gross domestic product spend on Black businesses in the state of Washington was 1.2 billion. In a state with a 5 or 6% population, that number should be closer to 24 billion. So if you're looking at a $20 billion deficit, and you ask yourself the question, in corporate America, you're being brought in at the low ends of salary ranges. You're making 53 cents to the dollar. The salary structure, here comes my HR. The salary structure is moving 5 to 10% a year, but your increase is only 3% while you're being coached that your performance is not good enough because your communication style is considered inferior because you're direct and you ask questions or you want clarity or you don't play games. It's never going to get fixed that way. It never. So why are we continuing to go down the same path that has failed repeatedly? Here's the thing. Clean out. Look, business can, the overhead spent in these corporations on HR. Let's just HR, clean that whole function. Just eliminate the whole function. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
It is seriously, it's full of these women that want power that have never set foot inside of another person of color's home. They don't have an understanding of people and dynamics. They don't care. They're racist themselves. They hide it. Again, bleach, Botox, all the things that keep them in positions of power while we're out here making 53 cents to the dollar. So here's how I propose we start to solve some of that. I believe by taking much of that over, just eliminate that overhead out and start investing that money into separate businesses where the direct reporting relationship is based on results into the C-suite, where you're hiring Cindy's firm to take care of A, B, and C. And through that contract, Cindy is receiving an equitable split on the profitability of that company, not a salary and not a fee structure that you're keeping down. You're paying white men 50 times more. You're paying Robin DiAngelo $35,000 to go do a 2-hour speech, and you're offering $1,500 to a black woman. That is a fact. So we can't win on fee structures and salaries because it's colonized and it's always kept the other people down. But if you start using a different formula around equitable split, then we're getting our fair share in the profitability. And then we have to fix, as controversial as it is, this country is going to have to do reparations for brown people, indigenous people whose lands have all been stolen and taken from them, while all these folks now are handing down multiple generations of wealth. And those brown and black people, you've got to repair it. The government, sooner or later, is going to have to cut checks. And that is my view about you change the entire ecosystem and you repair what you've done and eliminate all this fluff and overhead. And at Microsoft, I think it's like 13 levels between the CEO and the bottom floor. To hell with that. All that is a prison pipeline for black people to go in and try to manage their way up. You're not going to get there. It's not going to happen. So why do we keep regurgitating the same systems that have failed?
Yeah, I love that. I in the queer rights movement, it's like we have spent so much time spinning our wheels trying to convince people of our right to exist, when it's really much more efficient and effective. We're going to garner much more leverage if we attack the systems that promulgate this bigotry. And, I think it's probably true with any kind of bigotry. You can work for decades trying to get a loved one to say something, say the right words to you. But at the end of the day, even if you get there, often you have not addressed the unconscious biases that you're alluding to that affect their daily choices, and by extension, all the people they're managing or hiring when you're coming from the corporate framework. Let me ask you this. Let's talk about what that might look like, because every corporate environment I've ever been part of seems to have been segregated by race, gender, sexual orientation, at least by and large. I mean, you often see women and gay men confined to positions within HR, recruiting, East Indian and Asian people working in technology, Black and Latinx working on the shop floor, white cis men in the boardroom, etc. I mean, these are just stereotypes, and they exist for all sorts of complex reasons. But my point is that even companies that tout a certain degree of racial diversity often still leverage their straight white cis male supremacy to wield power and force people into certain lanes. Again, that protection racket that's indemnifying them from the latest PR crisis. So what would a truly integrated workforce look like? You talked about some ways to get there, but once we're there, like, how will we know when we're in it?
I don't think we should desire to be in it. I think we should desire to build our own wealth. Our access is through a separate entity, not attached to them, where they have control over us. So you reference, queer, there are, I'm using my quotation marks, there are certifications, like I'm certified as a minority-owned business. So when we say, okay, in the state of Washington, and you could argue that with these global companies, you look across the state and say, okay, what is the percentage of queer people who identify as queer? Okay, let's just say it's 25%. Then 25% of the profitability of that company should be funneled into queer businesses. If
Mhm.
right, so and the people who are the gatekeepers for a queer business is a queer person, not a white woman. When you think about, brown and black businesses, and we're doing consulting or whatever that is,
Mhm.
and it's in the state of Washington, it's 6%. What's 6% of your billions of dollars of profitability? And let's have a look. Let's force some transparency. We just passed a law around the transparency to the pay range. I mean, I appreciate our legislators. I work politically hard, um, but that is not where the wealth is being built. The wealth is being built on where equity is in the company,
Exactly.
where
Exactly.
multipliers are against the bonuses. I come out of financial services. Let me tell you some shit, Britt. Let me tell you where the money is. Let me just tell you. And then let me just talk about, I have to be a little cryptic because I signed non-disclosure agreements, but I've been in a I've been in a recent nonprofit, a very big one here in the Seattle area, run by a white woman. You would be stunned to know the kind of cash she brings versus what the person on the ground
Mhm.
floor brings. It's in a non-profit. And shame on these goddamn boards of directors that are allowing that to happen and listening to the narrative, and they just can't ever tell them no. So that system it's not going to serve any of us. It hasn't, it won't. They will continue to pick apart what's wrong with us. Let's have a different system in place. I believe I'm trying to get to her. So if any of your listeners know how I can get to Jane Fraser, she's the CEO of Citigroup. Citigroup did a study on the cost of racism to business, and it's in the trillions. I need to get, if that is, she's not a US based woman, also, which I like that she hasn't been born with I don't know her, so this is presumptuous, but I have noticed. I worked for a woman at my last company from London. She was not mired in all the racist crap the way these women in this country are mired into it. And so, hopefully, in a financial services firm, when you see the kind of money you're losing, those trillions of dollars could be coming to queer businesses, could be coming to black businesses. So we're losing money because it's easier and more comfortable to keep those women in positions of power who are they're the people destroying business. That is a fact. Business is being destroyed by white women, and no one wants to say that or call that out. The country, look at the numbers increasing following this idiot that sat in as number 45. They still vote for this stuff. Why would anybody do that? You know why. It's privilege. They want access.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about
Even when, in that case, even when they're voting against their own apparent economic self-interest, they're so attached to racial superiority impulses.
it.
I'll say it like that, just
Mhm.
because with a lot of them, I suspect that they aren't even attuned to their own racism. Some of them revel in it, but others are like so enmeshed in the system and unquestioning automatons. They just go marching along, kind of making their racist daily choices without questioning them. And so
Mhm.
time and time again, there's like 30% of the US population is willing to vote against their own economic self-interest in the name of racism
Mhm.
explicitly. And so it feels like it's a tough road to hoe. Like you're alluding to, I believe that diversity is an intrinsic competitive advantage for a company. And yet, so few companies seem to agree or be willing to take the risk of the wrath of,
It's been proven, Britt. It's been proven
yeah,
repeatedly by the
yeah.
number one white firm right out there. About McKinsey has done studies on this to show, their benchmarks are in other countries, or where boardrooms and decision making is diversified. And if anybody says to me diversity of thought, don't ever say that to my face again. I'm so sick of that as a crutch to not deal with real diversity. It's been proven, and the numbers are in the 35% increase in profitability, and yet we still stay stuck. we don't make a move, and we decide that we're going to lose trillions of dollars a year because it is so embedded in the fiber of this country and in the fiber of people who believe that they are a superior race, that and everyone, I don't care what anybody says, this is fascinating at this time, because one of my friends, she's a white woman, owns a business in Bellevue, and her daughter just got married to a black man. And I said, I remember talking to you back in 2016 and listening to all y'all's rhetoric about what you thought this businessman was going to do for this country. Now you about to have some black grandbabies. Call me when you need counsel, because again, every family is getting some. Nobody, and from the queer LGBTQIA, it's so normal that the fact that we still have to walk on eggshells around that, or consider it taboo to say something in your family. This is ridiculous. It's 2023. Why are we still walking on eggshells and rejecting who people are simply because we think we're better than or superior than other people? When
Yeah.
this stuff's in their closet, and I have said this, here goes one of my controversial statements. For all these women that think that, they're so much better, they better do their own homework about their own husbands. Let me just say that. What the husbands are up to. Because I could tell, I could spill some tea on this show if I wanted to.
You and I both know the system is working as designed. It is a feature,
Yep.
not a bug. And that's why we're here. The system is
Yep.
still working as designed all these hundreds of years later. And so here we are. And, so let's look at it from a different angle. Part of what you do is consulting work, and I'd love for you to talk more about that. And how can we start to empower our communities to actually harness and leverage their power to get empowered to enact this change? Like, people are so tired. Capitalism is relentless, and we have COVID and the flu and the RVS. I don't even know the acronym. I mean, we have like all these different diseases out. I mean, it's like, it is exhausting to live in the US at this moment. I bet the rest of the world is tired too. It's like, how can we start to summon the courage and the power to live the lives that we were actually meant to be leading?
To that point, I was just reading an article this morning. I want to say it was in Shanghai. Did you see it? Complete 100% shutdown now over the variant that's out there now. I'm going to answer that question on kind of two realms, right? One is a realm of divine, right? I am a woman of faith. Most Black community, we are raised in faith, not this right-wing crap we see in the news every day, but a faith about the love of all people, and the faith of fighting for our brothers and sisters out here to make sure that we're all safe and healthy and have food. Just from that perspective, I see divine things happening. And so the fact that this disease won't go away, right? Like, the storms that we've abused our nature, our country, we've abused the climate. So you can look now at the ramifications of that happening with earthquakes and extreme weather happening on, you can see the positions of power being challenged all around the world. You can see that the marching and the mobilization of people is fatiguing to live this life, but we don't stop because we have no choice but to keep going. We'll be killed. We are going to die if we don't. We're going to die regardless, but at least we have to change this trajectory for the next generation behind us. So where do we find the courage to do that when we're all fatigued, is your question. I mean, I just, I it's through the grace or gift of God that He made me a warrior, and that was taught to me through my own upbringing and abuse that I've had to endure. That's a whole nother book. And so the constant challenges, that's why you see so many Black women out here running for public office right now. That's why my show propels Black women's voices. Like, you see us, did you hear Trevor Noah the other night on his closing statement going off the show when he gave
So
homage to
brilliant.
Black women? And he said, Right. He's like, if you, Breck, when we ain't got time to fuck around. Like,
Right.
this stuff has been coming at us
Right.
every direction we go. This stuff is at us, and so we have no choice but to keep fighting. I invite the people. I invite people who want to do something different into this battle with me. And let me just say, it is not easy. I make it look easier than it is. It kills me too. I can't tell you how many nights I drop in bed thinking I can't go another day dealing with this stuff because it's everywhere. But what choice do I have?
Yeah.
What choice do I have?
Yeah.
So that,
Especially,
we need people to step into this battle with us. And quite frankly, this is white people's battle to fix. Like,
exactly.
it's their battle to fix. So help
Right.
us fix it.
Right. It's immoral to ask those who bear the brunt of the bigotry to also bear the burden of fixing the issue. It's absolutely white people's problem to fix racism, men's problem to fix misogyny, straight people's problem to fix queerphobia, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's just undebatable.
Yeah.
You know, I
Jesse
love.
Williams said,
Go ahead.
well, I'm going to give you one more thing. Jesse Williams, actor, got the Humanitarian Award a few years ago. And one thing he said that was so powerful, he said, if you have never stood up and fought and been vocal and fought against my oppression, then you don't get to stand up now and tell me how to fix it. Sit down. And so I'm going to emphasize that. If all you want to do is quarterback a woman like me and give your opinions about how I should do it, what I should be doing, but you've never spoken out or fought for this, step aside. We ain't got time for that mess. Nobody's got
Yeah.
time to listen to people who want an opinion. It's like the dad that sits on the sideline who's never played football, but he's out there criticizing the coach about what. So we're just done. We're so past that. Ain't nobody going to listen to it anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt your
Yeah.
question.
Not at all. You know, you alluded to it a moment ago when you talked about the cost that is incurred as you start to engage in this work. And it's important to be honest about that. It doesn't come free and easy. And I think another important point to acknowledge is, again, investment in our own personal growth and development to start to attune to the suffering of others and to start to feel that somatically in our body, to start to cultivate our awareness and to discern what we feel compelled to do when we're gifted this information. So for instance, let's take it today. Cindy's given us all sorts of gifts about her lived experience on this podcast. So you listener, me host, what do we all of us feel compelled to do with that information? That's kind of like what we have to ask each other. And part of me wonders if we are up for the task. But I think we have no other choice. Unlike Cindy, I don't have to live in the U.S. as a Black woman day in and day out, so I'm not compelled through that lived experience. But morally, I cannot witness the suffering of others without doing something and still look myself in the mirror. And that's the inward struggle I hope more of us engage in. I will tell you, Cindy, I don't know how much you know of the queer rights movement, but we owe it entirely to the Black civil rights movement. Explicitly, we copied, we were inspired by, we appropriated, we were aspired to by all sorts of Black leaders, the queer ones like Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin, but all sorts of other leaders as well. Well, Frank Kameny is explicit. He's a pioneer. He was a pioneer in the queer rights movement. He was explicit that he drew counsel, inspiration, and frankly plagiarized in many cases the successes and learned from the failures of the Black civil rights movement. So when we look at things like the marriage equality law that was passed in the U.S. A couple of days ago, we're recording this in December 2022, we owe that explicitly to all of the suffering that has come before us, not only from queer ancestors, but also from the struggles of women in women's suffrage, and then most particularly the struggles of Black people in the civil rights movement. So, Cindy, my question to you is, how can we work together as a coalition of diverse disparate communities who in many cases don't have a lot in common culturally. How can we work to override our prejudices, to learn more about other cultures, to work together to summon more political leverage and power to the greater good of really the whole world, frankly?
Yeah, it's a really great question. There's so many things that were going on inside of me as you were saying that that I want to get out. Um, that question is also asked regularly, even inside of Black community. How can we work together? Because we in Black community have to deal with the colorism issues, the light skin versus the dark skin, and the fact that we've all had to work for scraps from people that we fight each other for the scraps. And so I have
Right.
continued to propel and push people that to work together is going to require demographics of people who have historically not suffered to suffer. And what that looks like is you, Britt, goes forward and advocates for Cindi for, bring her in, bring Cindi in to speak in your organization. And then they're like, oh, well, we listened to her. She might be a little. And then you push back and say, and when you do that, they're going to be like, oh, let's not ask Britt again for,
Yeah.
and that's what will start to happen. And so the, white people, so Black people deal with that all the time. Like we're told no for everything, right? We're stepped over in lines in grocery stores. We're interrupted when we speak 50,000 times. Uh, And you watch what happens when somebody steps in to help us. My girlfriend told me the story about standing in line at a cheese counter and this white man was standing behind her. She waited her turn, and just as her turn, white woman walks up and steps in front of her. White man behind my friend steps forward and says, "Excuse me, ma'am. She was in line next." What do you think happened to that man? The women started doing this kind to him. And so I say this to white people that this ain't easy. And if you think that you could do one or two gestures to try to help move something forward that you've never experienced, I say welcome to being Black, because once you defend Black, you become Black, and none of y'all are going to like how the world is going to treat you because you've not seen it until you defend it. So, but how you can get involved and help is like women like me are not afraid of any of these folks anymore. Like Britt, I'm 58 and a half years old. I've been dealing with this for a hot minute. So propel like when you see me bringing candidates on, I'm trying to propel voices and get people who aren't bigots into office, right? When you see me bringing elected officials on, it's because I'm holding them accountable and I'm asking tough questions about, I recently did a show because I'm launching onto TV here in January. I did a show on Converge Media and I brought 5 elected people on. And I asked the question, I framed it up, we spent a lot of money because this is about money. What are you going to invest into community? Okay, you've spent all this on COVID. So here we are now in 2023. Will you prioritize Black people in the legislative session coming up in January? And it was a deafening 10 seconds of silence. And I just sat back in my chair to see who's going to bite and who's going to answer. And Senator Cooter out of Bellevue leaned forward and she said, yes, this is what. So again, courageous leaders who are willing to. Senator Cooter in Bellevue is a badass woman. She's a white woman who is out there fighting this fight. Help keep women like her elected. Help get voices of people, give them power, propel our businesses, put us forward, help sacrifice, step aside, stop trying to be a woman empowerment speaker when you don't do shit for Black women. Like, stop promoting yourself that way when you're harming us. Like, it's recognizing how you're creating harm to us or profiting off of us instead of helping pushing us forward. Know that we are suffering. Just because we make it look good doesn't mean that it isn't hard as hell in the background. We're the people dying disproportionately of cancer and the Black women's health issues. Like, we carry so much stress on our bodies. So for us to all work together, other folks have to be willing to sacrifice and push us forward and help us get into positions to dismantle. Did you catch the 3 Black women who fought battles? Stacey Abrams, Val Demings, these Black women were, and I look, because I'm politically active, I know how to look at all their fundraising report. They disproportionately outraised money, and I mean by like 30 million bucks to their opponents, and they still lost. So they're working their asses off to try to get in positions where they can influence policy and change, and yet they're taken down by, and I just believe if more white people stepped up and helped push these women over the finish line, help get out the vote, help get your communities active, and go out and knock doors in these communities and get people to the polls to help get the power transferred. We can't do it without the power. So that's how I articulate what is necessary. And don't be like the Portland women. Do you remember the Portland, what was it called? There was a Portland Gate of Women who stood up arm in arm, and you need to Google it. Your listeners, the Portland, and then so they went out to, it was all so they went out and claimed to be helping all the Black women, blah, blah, blah. And then read what happened after the march. Read how the women went and set up the nonprofit so that they could start the white women left the Black women out in the public side there. That's the kind of stuff we have to continually deal with, and why Black women rarely trust white women anymore, because everything is about a dollar for them. And so we're out here trying to create change in the country, living off of far less dollars than what they have. And so that's what we need is activism. We need the 3 S's, right? Sacrifice, sweat, and suffer right alongside of us.
Yeah, I love that. And let me make a special appeal on top of that to our white queer listeners that, like I said earlier, we really owe all of our rights to the struggles of other groups of people. And there's all sorts of good we can do in terms of platforming others, giving money to others, getting out on the streets with others, especially when it does not benefit us directly in any way. When we are not centering ourselves, when we're standing in the back of the room, lifting up others on our shoulder, leveraging, privilege isn't bad. When we leverage our privilege for the sake of diversity and togetherness and righting wrongs and reparations and land back for Indigenous people and all of that, privilege is really effective. And so we have, especially as white queer men, we have in many cases, we stand at the apex of the social pecking order, so close to the top, like white women, in so many cases, leveraging that proximal power to keep people down. We're so afraid others might catch up to us. And it's really time to pay respect where it's due. Cindi, my question to you is a little different. What have you taught your adult son about workplace cultures and how to thrive in them?
I've taught my adult son, he does work in an organization now, so I'll be diplomatic how I say it, but I told him to never depend on them. He's got other things that he works on himself, and I think it's beneficial for him to go get some experience and learn and garner and gain what he can. But I also taught him to not depend on somebody who on a dime can turn your life upside down simply because they don't like you. Now, my son happens to be white passing. You've probably seen pictures of my son. I'm technically biracial. His father's white. So my son looks very white and has not necessarily had to deal with, but he's also not high enough in a position of power yet. My hope is that he walks the hell out by the time he gets to middle management, because I don't want to see him have to go through, and my grandchildren, right? My son was recently married. He married a brown woman. She is Japanese and Filipino. And because of my father was very dark skinned. My grandchildren could likely be very dark skinned with, my daughter-in-law's skin complexion. And so when my grandkids come, I believe that that's when my son is going to start to get some of the stuff that I've been, when he sees his mom out here, he's like, Jesus, Mom. I'm like, well, right now you can think that, but you're going to thank my ass when you're 40. Because it's just, somebody's got to do this work, right? Somebody's got to go fighting for the rights of this next generation of people. I will also say that white people are not going to lose anything by this work. They're going to gain. Because again, when you look at trillions of dollars lost because of lack of diversity, when you look at financial outperformance, white people's prosperity is going to multiply if they could just get past their ingrained, teachings that they're so afraid to learn about how race is actually playing into everything in their lives right now. We will all prosper when we focus and fix the lowest denomination of people. So I implore white people to join me in this fight. Don't be intimidated by a strong, candid speaking woman. Help this woman, help her do this work and make things better for other people. How's that for
Love
a
it.
feisty podcast this morning, Britt?
I love it. Cindi, as we wrap up, I'm curious, what do you hold most dear? What gives you hope in this world? Where do you seek refuge? What sustains you?
Again, I will say this sounds very cliche, but I am a woman of faith. And I take peace in that because I firmly believe I'm doing the work of the Father, and I will one day hear the words, well done. And, when we get put on this earth, I don't feel like any of us are by accident. I feel like it's for a purpose. So that sounds a little cliche because I do find peace in that. And it's where I get inspiration from. I'm just wired different, Britt. Like I've just been born a fighter, came into the world fighting, having to deal with all kinds of shit. Every job I had, like there's always this stuff. And so inherently in me is I just have a DNA of a warrior. So if you've seen Woman King, I'm Viola Davis of corporate America, right? Like, we just know that we got to take the baton and we have to lead and we have to go in front. And you can't create change staying silent and sitting in the background. Sooner or later, this work, watch me when I tell you it's about to take off because the reckoning, the racial reckoning is happening right now, and it is not going backwards. And you cannot woo us into and pay us $150,000 a year while you beat the crap out of our mental health. Nobody's going to do it anymore, right? We'd rather work for 50,000, be able to be in a safe spot and enjoy our families and have some mental rest than have to tolerate y'all folks, 10 hours a day, 50 hours a week. So that's all changing, and I'm going to continue to spearhead this work.
I love our conversation because it was filled with a lot of hope, but grounded in authenticity. It wasn't naive or Pollyanna. It was real and based on lived experience and reality. But also, it's not, like you said, things are changing and this change seems to be inevitable, irrevocable. I think that we all can take hope in that and find strength in that things are changing and we can see it happening every day. And yes, of course, there's a tremendous amount of work to do, and all of us are required to do that work. But it's just been such a wonderful time to talk with you and reconnect after all these years. Thank you so much for your time today and for being on our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Brett. I appreciate it. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I encourage everybody to pick up Cindi's book. It's was just so inspirational. It's called The Color of Courage, Crushing Racism in Corporate America. And we will put links to all sorts of goodies that we discussed in the show notes, including Cindi's socials and a link to where you can purchase her book on Amazon. And so you can keep in touch with her directly. Listeners, you have made it through another episode of Not Going Quietly. I'm so proud of you. There's a lot of medicine today. You took your medicine. I'm really proud of you for hanging with us. It was a wonderful chat. So much goodness came out of it. And I hope you have a really wonderful inner journey, thinking through, discerning, praying about what you now feel compelled to do with all the information that Cindi gifted us today, and to figure out how you can get in the game, into the stream of life, and really start helping yourself, frankly, by helping others and creating a better world. Thank you so much from both of us. We really appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks, listeners. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Not Going Quietly with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
Thanks so much for joining us on this wild ride as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
Check out our show notes for links, additional information, and episodes located on your favorite podcast platform.